and that sort of thing. So we're trying to have a different thing each term. And the one that was this term was pay it forward, which the whole term pay it forward is something of a bit of a curiosity for me. So it's a weird thing that you have to tell someone to do that. So I kind of found that a bit odd, so I changed it to play it forward, which to me, well, seemed a bit better in terms of what I'm going to speak about. So the verse goes like this: brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks that they are something when they're not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else. For each one should carry their own load. Nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the word should share all good things with their instructor. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. So this is the verse that I kind of picked to kind of fit the theme, and it was kind of a little bit rubbery at the time. And I thought, well, okay, so paying it forward means that I'm going to use the gifts that I've got, and then I'm going to give them to other people. And I thought, that's okay, but I reckon I can do it a little bit better. So the best way that I could explain what this verse means is by looking at games. Okay? Now, a game has rules, and inside of the game, you have those rules, and those rules are really important, and they're important that you follow them. Now, we're in the middle of we're actually in the middle of a school / church on the weekends. And what's really interesting when you go past the school, if you drive past the primary school, or you drive past a secondary school, but not quite as much as a primary school, or even in a kindergarten, if you have a look at a kindergarten, what's one of the things that you really notice is that they have a playground. There are playgrounds inside of schools. We have like courts out there. We have handball courts just on the side here. At the primary school, same thing. There's like really, really cool little spaces where the kids can get together and they play their games. And they play basketball, they play netball, they play handball. And what games do, they're really important for people to learn to socialise with each other. And we're really drawn in, as people, we're really drawn into games that help us to socialise. And what I did with the verse is I broke it up into little key parts. And we're looking at the way that it can help us to socialise with each other. So the first one I have is live by the Spirit. Carry each other's burdens. Don't think you're something when you're not. Each person should test their own actions. Take pride in yourself without comparison to others. Carry your own load. You reap what you sow, and you cannot get away from that. And whoever sows to try and get things of the flesh will reap destruction. And the Spirit will reap eternal life. And don't become tired of doing good. And especially do good to other believers. So inside of the game, if you're looking at any game, if you obey a lot of those rules, you're going to be playing a good game. And if you decide that you're going to try and cheat in those rules, or do something different in the game, or play the game slightly to your own advantage, then you're not going to be well liked in the game, and you're not going to be able to play to the best of your ability. So I just had a quick look at the phenomenon of play. And this is a pretty cool thing that I liked. Now, play is something that's not unique to humans. It goes across all cultures, and there seems to be an element of play in all cultures. And children especially love to play. And have you ever asked yourself why they love to play? It's massive in primary school. And I remember a genius junior primary teacher named Yvonne Folland from St. Paul. And some of you might even know her. Some of you might have, some people here might have been taught by her. She's been around for a fair while. She had one of her methods to get reception kids integrated into school was through play. And she thought that, and probably is totally correct in that, because she taught both of my kids. And her focus first off was not so much about getting them to read and learning to write correctly and learning to know their numbers and how to add up and things like that. It was more about getting them into the classroom, playing the games that you play in the classroom, and teaching them to kind of act properly where they are. Now, that I thought was really good. Learning to act properly where you are. Now, if you don't know how to act in a certain situation, you can get quite disorientated. And if you're disorientated, then you're lost. And if you're lost, it's not really a very good place to be. So I think we've all played a game where we might not know all of the rules. Think boys and netball is one that comes to mind. When boys play netball, they don't quite know all the rules. And I've had to witness this quite a lot over the years. When boys go into the game, they've kind of got their basketball game all set out. They know exactly how that works. And they're trying to put the rules of the basketball onto the netball game, and it's not quite working out for them. And boy, do they get grumpy at the umpire, because the umpire's pulling them up for stuff, because they're stepping and they're doing all sorts of wrong things with the ball, and they're kind of like, not really appreciating the rules of the game. They're a little bit rough. It's a bit tough. There's more that goes on inside of the game that meets the eye. Now, there's another little thing, because there's a guy named Jaak Pankstep. I think I've had him on the slide before. And what he did was he studied rats and how rats play. And rats will wrestle with each other, and it's kind of cool. There might be two rats in a cage, and they will play with each other. And rats that play with each other actually develop properly and socialise properly. And it's a pattern of like how to socialise with other rats. And what's really cool is inside of the rat game that they play, the wrestling rat game, you get a big rat and you get a little rat. And if the big rat wrestles the little rat, if the big rat wrestles the little rat and wins all the time, then the little rat won't want to play. Okay? What the big rat has to do, and this is what scientists measure, if your job was to measure rats, it's kind of cool. You have to let the little one have an opportunity to try and win. So you have to let, and it's 30% is the number that they discovered was the ideal rat play number of potentially winning. And so when the big rat, if the big rat does that, then the little rat will want to keep playing because there's a potential for the little rat to win. Now, when they look at that and transferred it over to human beings, then it's pretty much exactly the same. It's so important that there's a potential to kind of win the game, otherwise we're not interested in it. If there's no point to the game, if there's no potential whatsoever of winning the game, then we're just going to go, nah, I'll focus my attention on something else I can actually win at. So we learn a lot about playing games and transferring that game playing of how to act inside of the world, which is kind of living by the Spirit. Now, a game is the real world, but in low resolution. So the way that we play a game, you can multiply that out into the big wide world. So it's good actually to see the world in low res because the world's really, really complex. Now the game has a pattern the same as other things in the world. And if you really look at the world, even a church service has a pattern that emulates the whole big wide world. And that's why we participated in the church game. We participate in this game. You guys are seated in the rows. I'm up here at the top talking. You're all pointed at me. No one's, hopefully not too many people, are looking the other way or falling asleep or whatever. It's fine if you do. But there's a way to act. You guys know how to act. You know how to play the game. Not everyone does. Not everyone knows this game of church. Not everyone knows how to play the game as they walk into this space. It's a different sort of thing. We need to live by the Spirit. So, in game terms, this is like an overarching force. There is a bigger thing above us that kinda is the reason why we're playing the game. Now, who's ever heard this one before? It's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. And I was told this by my parents, and they were probably told it by their parents, and when I was a kid growing up, I went, that's just stupid. What a stupid rule. Of course you want to win. That's the most important part of the game. But what this saying says is that when you're in a game, you're not just in that game. That game is sitting inside of another game, which is sitting inside of another game. Okay? We need to understand that there's a meta game going on. There's a game that's you're playing, but it's inside of another game, which is inside of another game. So at school here in Endeavour College, it's a little bit more complex. So when the kids come to school, there's a game they've got to play when they arrive. The way that they behave. How do they act properly so that they can get the best benefit out of whatever it is that they're doing. Remember the 30% rule. They have to have a potential of winning the game or they're not going to play. And we get a lot of those kids that just give up on the game. Sometimes we miss out on helping them where we should. In the church games, same thing. If there's not that 30% rule, if someone doesn't feel like they're going to be able to win the game, whatever the game is at church, they might not participate. Every classroom space here is a different type of game with a different type of umpire. And every place you go to has a different game. Now the Endeavour game is played inside of a big playing field that gets more and more complex, and it's as big as life. You can see how the rules of low resolution games can apply to high resolution games. In the game we are all playing, we have to look after our teammates. And even the opposition, while winning is important, we all have to keep playing, and we should help each other to better understand the rules. Now, there's also good and bad ways of playing the game. If you play the game wrong, you can bet that people will get upset and not want to play anymore. What's really important is to do your part and carry a certain level of responsibility. This is the carrying the load bit. Yeah, I pulled that straight off the Facebook site. Just need a picture. And what's really important, you have to take responsibility. When you're playing the game, you've got a responsibility to play the game properly. So let's look at the pattern of handball, because I think that one's an awesome game. If you remember handball from when you were in school, it's generally a little square, can be multiple squares. You've got a ball, you have a king, queen, jack, dunce, I think, and then there's a lineup of people wanting to get into the game. And like the king gets to start the game. They get to start the ball rolling. They are a little bit more in control of the entire structure. Maybe a little bit more than others, okay? Now the point of the game is to pay attention to what's happening inside of the structure. And that's really important, because if you don't pay attention to what's happening inside of the structure, things can go a little bit astray. You also have to play fairly or honestly. Now, this is the other thing which I watch all the time. Particularly the year 7s when they start school here, and year 8s, it's generally the ones who need to play handball that play handball. And the reason they need to play handball is because they do lack some things that people can learn by playing handball. In that, they need to be able to cope with getting out, because you will. You need to cope with not always winning. You need to cope with other people who might have differing opinions on whether that ball was there, or whether it hit this line or didn't hit that line. You need to have an idea of how to work socially inside of a game and also how to manage it. Now, handball is a very complex game when it gets going, because you can draw alliances with other people inside of the court. The king can say, oh look, I want to stay up here, but if you want to be queen, that's fine with me. And if you work as a queen and I work as a king to keep those other people in the bottom area and keep them rotating, that's fine with me as well. And then you might have some other people in the line going, you know what? Those two people have been sitting at the top of that for too long, and I think we can join together and maybe overthrow that king. It's all fun. But you also reap what you sow. It's really complex too. You can do this just to please yourself, just to win the game for your own glory. But this leads to destruction. It's a lie to pretend that the whole point of the game is to get glory for yourself. If you really look at the game, the whole point of the game is the interaction with the game. That's the whole idea of it. You have to work, and this is the weird thing, you have to work towards the direction of the game. That game is going somewhere and it's happening outside of you. You have to play the game with the aim of the betterment of the game. Which means you have to carry each other's burdens inside of the game, particularly in team games. You can see people, well, if you really, really watch people who watch, because that's what I like to do when I go to football, because I barrack for the Crows and we don't get too much success. So you get to watch everybody else. And so what happens is, if you really look at the crowd, next time you're at a game, look at the crowd around the game and look what they do and look what they are paying attention to and what they see as a good thing. And it's kind of cool when you see somebody in the game selflessly sacrifice themselves or their own glory so that somebody else can get the ball and then kick the goal. You know, that's seen as uplifting. In fact, people actually go, you know, they stand up in their seats. They actually get excited by that. When you think about it, it's not really that big a deal, but we get excited by it. When the whole point of it is to score a goal at the end and get enough goals for your team. It's kind of cool. Now, the other thing is not to think you're something when you are not. Human beings have a real problem with unearned celebrity. When people become famous because of some sort of reason that they didn't earn it. If you've carried your own burden, then you've earned it. In the game, if you carry your own part or thing, then you're valued inside of the game, and that's a good thing. When we're inside of a community, it's very important to let people carry their loads. Let people carry their burdens, or they don't feel like they're part of the game. Ever had a team where you had a person that was probably left out of the team, kind of, but they were playing on the field, no one handballed to them, no one threw the ball to them, no one kicked to them because no one in the team believed that they were worth it? That's a terrible thing for the person who's got that position. Everyone needs to feel like they can carry a burden. We are people that like to carry things. We like to lift loads. We like to take things on. We like responsibility. If we don't get that, it's that 30% rule. We stop playing the game. Now this is of course, transfers, there we go, into the Christian game. The Christian game has the same pattern, if you look at it. And you look carefully at the rituals that we do in church. And there's really cool ones. You know, if you ever actually look at what goes on inside of a service, and how that plays out. If you really look at the game that's played, or the pattern of behaviour that's played inside of this game, you can see stuff that we want to emulate out into the big world. Things like, there are certain messages that are a little bit more important than other messages. That's why I'm up on a level above. If it's a sporting field, why is the crowd higher than the people playing the sport? In this place, I'm up higher. It's kind of weird. At the centre is a cross. What does the cross represent? It's at the middle of everything, sitting in the centre of the front, over an altar. An altar is a representation of sacrifice. We say that sacrifice is an important thing. We're saying that Jesus' sacrifice was important. We also say that Jesus is something that we should try and emulate, something we should try and be like. So sacrifice of what we want is important. And you come here to the church service each Sunday. You're sacrificing your Sunday. You're sacrificing time for that. We say that that's important. How does that game play out into the rest of your lives? Exactly that way. Exactly that way. That there are some things that are more important than what I might want for myself to get myself things. It's important that I carry a load. It's important that I carry a burden. It's important that I live that pattern out. That's how I can actually function in a good society. You can learn a lot when you look at the rituals that people participate in. And it's one of the things at Endeavour College. We have services and we have chapels and kids participate, but often they don't really realise what's going on. And they see it as being really, they see it as important, but they don't quite see why. And the last little bit was, don't become tired of doing good. Especially help your teammates. Especially help other Christians. Because as Christians who are participating in the world, they are actually giving to other people, doing what they can to carry the burden of other people, to carry the load themselves and move things forward. And if you don't look after the Christians, if you don't look after your own teammates, then the game can't keep going. And I think that's something that we have to think about, because Christ was the person who played the best game. He was the greatest of all time. And I think we should try to play it like he did. And that's where I end. So we'll pray. Lord, we ask that you be with us as we play, that we can bring your Spirit into our lives here at MLCC, so that we can improve the game for all and win the ultimate prize in the end. May the glory belong to you, in your name. Amen.